My name is Marie Mitchell, 32 years old, and I should have been celebrating what was supposed to be a proud family milestone. Instead, I was sitting at my father's 70th birthday party, watching him publicly humiliate my family while elevating my sister-in-law's family to near royalty status. The elegant ballroom of the Riverside Hotel sparkled around us, but all I could focus on was the cruel mathematics of favoritism playing out before my eyes. A toast was coming. Decisions had to be made in seconds. So, with the brightest smile I could manage, I did something that would change our family dynamics forever. Before I continue this story, hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. The choices we make when we've reached our breaking point reveal who we truly are, and I am about to show you mine. I grew up in what looked like a solid middle-class family from the outside. Our house in the suburbs was comfortable with 3 bedrooms, a small yard and the kind of stability that my father, David Mitchell, had worked his entire career at the regional bank to provide. He always emphasized traditional values and the importance of family hierarchy. What visitors never saw was the emotional hierarchy he maintained behind those respectable walls. My mother stayed silent when my father's favoritism became obvious, having learned long ago that challenging him only made things worse for everyone. My brother Robert was always the quieter one, accepting our father's judgments without question. He married young, became a bank employee like our father wanted, and started his family early. Robert and I have been married for 8 years now, and we have 2 children, Lucas, who's 8, and Emma, who's 6. After we married, the difference in how my father treated his 2 sons became starkly evident. For Robert's older brother David and his wife Claire, there were constant celebrations of their achievements, praise for their success, and obvious pride in their accomplishments. For Robert and me, there were polite acknowledgements of our steady, reliable choices. I threw myself into practical work, partly to contribute to our family finances, but mostly because building our own stability was our path forward. Every accounting certification, every client I managed, every dollar we saved became another step towards security. When I earned my bookkeeping credentials while working part-time, my father seemed more interested in pointing out that it wasn't a real degree than acknowledging my achievement. My job at the accounting firm became my refuge for several hours each day. I could breathe. I worked with people who valued competence and reliability. I was building something meaningful with Robert, who showed me what partnership looked like. We even started saving for the children's college funds, slowly building the foundation my father never had to create. Throughout those years, my relationship with Claire became increasingly strained. She had become the perfect daughter-in-law, absorbing my father's worldview, his judgments, his way of measuring worth through external success. Family gatherings became exercises in restraint as I listened to her casual mentions of private schools, luxury vacations, and David's latest promotion. She was 35 now, working as a manager at a tech company while maintaining their perfect suburban lifestyle, fully aligned with my father's vision of success. What my father didn't know was that Robert and I had been quietly building our own financial foundation through careful budgeting and consistent saving. It wasn't impressive by David and Claire's standards, but it was ours, earned through years of disciplined choices and sacrifice. In the months leading up to my father's 70th birthday, I noticed him becoming increasingly focused on the differences between his 2 sons' families. He would make comments during our visits, seeming to highlight the contrast between David's success and Robert's steady but unremarkable progress. At first, I thought this might be just his usual patterns until my friend Sarah pointed out how calculated it seemed. Sarah was the first to say it out loud. We were having coffee after work 3 weeks before the party. I had just finished telling her about another family gathering where David's family received the prime seating and premium attention. After I finished, Sarah looked at me seriously. "Your father is building a narrative, Marie. He's creating a justification for something." I had dismissed it then, but the uneasiness lingered. What kind of justification? The pieces started coming together when I overheard him on the phone during a recent visit. He was in his den, door slightly open, talking about appropriate inheritance distribution based on achievement and family contribution. When he saw me in the hallway afterward, his face shifted to that practiced smile. "Just planning for the future, Marie, but nothing for you to worry about. Focus on taking care of your family. When I mentioned that Robert might have to work late and potentially miss part of the party due to a client emergency, my father seemed almost pleased. One less inconvenient presence, I would later realise. 2 days before the party, I was in our kitchen helping Emma with her homework when I heard David and my father talking in the living room during a family visit. Their voices were low, but one phrase from my father came through clearly. Marie and Robert have always needed more guidance. You might need to help them understand their role in the family going forward. The birthday celebration itself was elegant. Robert made it after all, along with Sarah and her husband, who had become like extended family to us over the years. My father presided over the event with David and Claire prominently positioned at his side, both dressed impeccably, both performing their roles as the successful branch of the family perfectly. If you didn't know to look for it, you would miss how my father's acknowledgements of our family always contained subtle limitations. Robert and Marie work so hard to provide a stable life for their children. Stable, not successful. We're grateful for their steady contribution to the family. Steady, not exceptional. Those little phrases planted for anyone listening, creating a picture of us as somehow less capable, less worthy of the family's pride than our accomplishments suggested. That evening, Robert had to step out briefly for a work call, apologetic but necessary to resolve a client issue that couldn't wait until Monday. I stayed with the children, already feeling the familiar tension that came with extended family gatherings where our worth was constantly being measured. Your father-in-law has a very specific way of seeing the world, Sarah admitted quietly. Just stay alert tonight, okay? I should have paid more attention to that warning. The birthday celebration my father organised was elegant but clearly stratified. The Riverside Hotel's ballroom had been reserved, with professional service and catering that spoke to careful planning and significant expense. Approximately 30 guests circulated throughout the room, family members and longtime friends all there supposedly to honour his milestone birthday. Looking around, I recognised his former banking colleagues, longtime neighbours, extended family, and a few genuine family friends, including Sarah and her husband. The seating chart had been meticulously planned, with David and Claire's family positioned at the head table, while Robert's family was seated toward the back with distant relatives. From across the room, I watched my father work the crowd. He was in his element, dignified and respected, the successful retired bank manager and proud family patriarch. To those who didn't know the family dynamics intimately, the arrangement appeared natural, even appropriate. What struck me as particularly painful was how the children were being treated. Normally at family functions, all the grandchildren would play together or receive equal attention. Tonight, David's children, Noah and Sophia, ages 12 and 10, were introduced to guests as future scholars attending private academy. My children, Lucas and Emma, were mentioned in passing as good kids who work hard in their public school. As I accepted polite congratulations on behalf of the birthday celebration, I noticed William Chen, my father's longtime financial advisor, carrying a portfolio. He nodded to me politely before heading toward my father. They spoke briefly, William showing him something in the folder before my father directed him to a quieter corner. I made a mental note to observe what that might be about. Margaret Foster, one of my father's former colleagues, approached me with a glass of punch in hand. She seemed uncomfortable, glancing around before offering standard pleasantries about the lovely party. I've always admired how practical you and Robert are, she said, her voice carrying an undertone of sympathy. Not everyone needs to chase the big achievements to have a good life. Before I could respond, she was called away by another guest. The comment sat heavily in my chest, another reminder of how we were perceived. My father's neighbour, Janet, found me by the dessert table. She had known our family for years and seemed genuinely fond of all of us, regardless of economic status. Your father has been very focused on family legacy lately, she said, her eyes darting to make sure he wasn't within earshot. He's been talking a lot about ensuring the family's future is in capable hands. What do you mean by capable? I asked. She shook her head apologetically. I've probably said too much already. Just be aware of the bigger picture. As she walked away, I noticed Dr. Patricia Wells, my father's longtime friend and estate planning attorney, deep in conversation with my father near the bar. They both glanced toward our family's table, then continued talking in hushed tones. My uneasiness deepened. The servers were arranging champagne glasses for what would undoubtedly be a toast. I noticed that the glasses at the head table were slightly different with gold rims, while the others were standard crystal. Even in the glassware, the hierarchy was maintained. Sarah appeared at my side, elegant in a simple navy dress, her expression reflecting the tension I was feeling. "Something feels very orchestrated about all this, Marie," she whispered. "Your father keeps having strategic conversations, and Claire is working the room like she's running for office." "I know," I replied. "I feel like I'm watching a performance, but I can't figure out what the real agenda is." Memories of previous family celebrations flashed through my mind. Emma's 6th birthday, when my father had given Noah and Sophia elaborate gifts while handing Emma a simple card with $20. Lucas's school awards ceremony, which my father had missed because it conflicted with Sophia's piano recital. Always these subtle messages about whose achievements mattered, whose futures were worth investing in. As the evening progressed, the birthday toast was announced for 800. I checked my phone. Robert was handling his work call but would return before the speeches began. I would be managing the children's reactions to whatever was coming. I was helping Emma with her dessert when I overheard my father talking to his brother. "Marie and Robert are good people, don't misunderstand me," he was saying, his voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. "But David has always been the one with real vision for the future. Some people are born to lead, others to follow steady paths." His brother made agreeable noises while I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, listening to my worth being evaluated in public. "That's why decisions about the family's future need to be made thoughtfully," he continued. "Some shoulders are built to carry more responsibility than others." Throughout the evening, Claire had been circulating gracefully, occasionally bringing people over to meet David, facilitating introductions that seemed designed to showcase their social and professional connections. They operated as a polished unit, and the looks they exchanged with my father appeared loaded with understanding. As the time for the toast approached, servers began directing guests toward the main area. The champagne service was clearly tiered, with the gold-rimmed glasses being distributed to the head table first. My sense of dread intensified with every passing minute. Dr. Wells approached our table, all smiles and professional warmth, but her eyes held a calculating quality that made me uncomfortable. "Your father tells me you've been managing the family finances very responsibly," she said casually. "Financial planning can be overwhelming for young families." "We manage our budget carefully," I replied firmly. "We're building toward our goals systematically." She nodded, a patronizing smile playing at her lips. "Of course. Still, sometimes families benefit from more experienced guidance. Your father mentioned he'd be happy to help coordinate some financial planning for you and Robert." I thanked her coolly and watched her move away, my mind racing. Why would my father be discussing our finances with his attorney? The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. The moment for the birthday toast arrived with my father standing and tapping his champagne glass with a small silver spoon. Conversations quieted as guests gathered around. David and Claire stood prominently beside him, with their children positioned like a portrait of success. Robert had returned from his call and stood with me and our children toward the back of the group. "Friends and family," my father began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Tonight we celebrate not just my 70 years, but the legacy we're building together as a family." Polite applause followed, and I smiled encouragingly at Lucas and Emma, who were watching their grandfather with interest. As I look toward the next phase of my life, I'm filled with pride seeing both my sons in their own paths, he continued. David and Claire building their success in the broader world, and Robert and Marie maintaining the steady foundation that every family needs. There it was, the familiar pattern of praise wrapped in limitation. I maintained my smile while feeling my chest tighten. But tonight, I want to share some thoughts about our family's future and how we can best support each other in the years ahead. What did he mean by supporting each other? My concern was shifting to alarm. Robert squeezed my hand reassuringly as my father continued his speech. The room felt charged with expectation, as if everyone knew something I didn't. "I've been working with my advisors to ensure that our family legacy is preserved and enhanced for the next generation," he said, gesturing toward Dr. Wells and William Chen. "This requires making thoughtful decisions about responsibility and leadership." I glanced at the children. Lucas was listening politely, but Emma seemed restless. Neither of them understood what was happening. But I was beginning to realize this speech was about more than birthday wishes. As my father paused to sip his champagne, I caught Claire's eye across the room. She was smiling, but there was something triumphant in her expression that made my stomach drop. That's when he said it. When it comes to our family's financial future and the care I'll need as I age, I've decided that David and Claire are best positioned to handle the primary responsibilities, he announced, his voice warm with what sounded like generous logic. Their resources and experience make them natural leaders for important family decisions. The room buzzed with what sounded like approval, but I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Of course, Robert and Marie will have their role too, he continued, looking directly at our family with a beneficent smile. Given their availability and Robert's caring nature, they'll be handling the day-to-day care responsibilities. It's a perfect match of everyone's strengths. The math of it hit me like a physical blow. David and Claire would control family financial decisions, while Robert and I would provide the labor. The successful branch of the family would manage the money, while the steady branch would handle the actual work. But he wasn't finished. To make this transition smooth, I've arranged for David and Claire to begin overseeing the family finances immediately, including guidance for Robert and Marie's budgeting. Sometimes we all need help making the best choices for the future. I felt Robert stiffen beside me. Emma tugged at my dress. "Mommy, what does that mean?" she whispered. Before I could respond, my father raised his glass again. To family, to wisdom, and to each person contributing what they do best. As everyone raised their glasses, I found myself staring at my children's confused faces, then at David and Claire's satisfied expressions, then at my father's pleased smile as he surveyed his perfectly orchestrated evening. The champagne glass in my hand felt heavy with the weight of what had just been decided about our lives without our consultation. The room erupted in applause and congratulations, with guests approaching David and Claire to offer their support for their new family responsibilities. Several people patted Robert on the shoulder with comments about how good it was that he could help take care of his father. No one seemed to notice that we hadn't been asked if we agreed to any of this arrangement. My father approached our small group, his face glowing with the satisfaction of a plan well executed. "I hope you understand how this makes the most sense for everyone," he said, his tone leaving little room for disagreement. Robert found his voice first. "Dad, we should probably discuss the details of this arrangement." "Of course, son. David and Claire will coordinate with you about the schedule and expectations. They have experience managing complex responsibilities." Emma was still tugging at my dress. "Mommy, why does Uncle David get to tell us what to do with our money?" The innocent clarity of a 6-year-old's question cut through all the adult politeness and strategic phrasing. In that moment, watching my daughter's confused face, something inside me shifted decisively. I set down my champagne glass and knelt to Emma's eye level. "He doesn't, sweetheart. We make our own choices about our money and our family." Standing back up, I met my father's gaze steadily. "We appreciate your concern for family coordination, Dad. But Robert and I will need to discuss this privately before agreeing to any new arrangements." The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate. My father's expression shifted from benevolent authority to something harder. "Marie, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of this discussion. These decisions have been made based on what's best for the entire family." "Then the entire family should have been part of making them," I replied, my voice carrying clearly enough for nearby guests to hear. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth in public in front of witnesses, without apologizing or softening my words for everyone else's comfort. My father's face hardened as he realized his carefully orchestrated evening had just encountered its first real resistance. The ride home was quiet except for the children's chatter about the party. Robert and I exchanged looks over their heads, both processing what had happened but not wanting to discuss it while Lucas and Emma were listening. Once we got the children settled at home and tucked into bed, Robert and I sat at our kitchen table with cups of coffee, finally able to speak freely. "Did that really just happen?" I asked, still feeling stunned by the evening's revelations. Robert rubbed his face tiredly. "My father just announced that my brother is going to manage our finances and that we're going to be his primary caregivers, without asking either of us first. In front of 30 people," I added. Like it was a done deal. We sat in silence for a moment, the magnitude of the presumptions settling in. "The thing is," Robert said slowly, "I don't entirely disagree with helping take care of him as he ages. He's my father. But the way he set this up, with David and Claire making decisions while we do the work, it's the same pattern it's always been," I finished. "David gets the authority, you get the responsibility." Robert nodded grimly. And now it's official family policy. I thought about Emma's question, about the innocent clarity that had cut through all the adult manipulation. Robert, what if we just don't agree? He looked at me with surprise. What do you mean? I mean, what if we tell them we need to work out our own arrangement? We're adults with our own family to consider. We don't need David and Claire managing our budget, and we don't need to accept whatever caregiving schedule they think is appropriate. Robert was quiet for a long time considering this. That would be a major confrontation with my father. It would be a major conversation about boundaries, I corrected. There's a difference. The next morning brought a series of phone calls that confirmed our worst suspicions about the previous evening's agenda. First, Claire called to coordinate about the new family arrangement, speaking as if everything had been settled and we were just working out logistics. David has some ideas about streamlining your budget, she said cheerfully. And we were thinking that alternating weekends for Dad's care would be a good starting point. Though, of course, you'll handle the weekday needs since you have more flexibility. More flexibility. As if my part-time work was less important than her career. Claire, we haven't agreed to this arrangement yet, I said carefully. Robert and I need to discuss what works for our family. There was a pause. Oh, well, Dad seemed to think everything was settled last night. But I'm sure once you talk it through, you'll see how much sense this makes for everyone. The second call came from Dr. Wells's office asking when Robert, and I could come in to sign the financial planning documents that would allow David to assist with our family's money management. The third call was from my father himself. Marie-Claire mentioned you might have some concerns about our family coordination plan, he said, his voice carrying that tone of patient authority I remembered from childhood. I thought we should clear up any confusion. We're not confused, Dad. We just need to be part of the decision-making process for arrangements that affect our lives. I understand that change can feel unsettling, he replied, as if I were a child afraid of a new school. But sometimes we need to trust that people with more experience can see the bigger picture. What bigger picture? Robert has always been better at following than leading, Marie. You know that. David has the skills and resources to handle complex family management. This arrangement uses everyone's strengths. The casual dismissal of Robert's capabilities, delivered as if it were objective fact, ignited something in me that I had been suppressing for years. Robert manages complex client accounts at the bank every day, I said firmly. He's perfectly capable of managing his own family's decisions. Of course he is, within his scope, my father replied smoothly. But scope is the key word here, isn't it? After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone, realizing that this wasn't going to be resolved through polite conversation. My father had made his decision and expected compliance just as he always had. That afternoon, Sarah stopped by for coffee, ostensibly to check on how we were processing the previous evening. That was quite a performance your father-in-law put on, she said, settling into our kitchen chair. Very carefully orchestrated. It felt like we were props in someone else's play, I admitted. Marie, what are you going to do? I looked around our modest but comfortable kitchen, thinking about the life Robert and I had built through our own choices and efforts. We weren't wealthy like David and Claire, but we had something that belonged to us. I think, I said slowly, we're going to politely but firmly decline to participate in his family management plan. Sarah raised her eyebrows. That's going to cause waves, probably. But the alternative is spending the rest of our lives living according to someone else's assessment of what we're capable of. That evening, Robert and I had a long conversation with Lucas and Emma about the previous night's events, explaining in age-appropriate terms that Grandpa had made some assumptions about our family that we needed to correct. Are we in trouble? Lucas asked, his 8-year-old mind, trying to process the adult complexities. No, sweetheart, Robert said gently. Sometimes adults disagree about the best way to handle things. We're going to work it out. Will Grandpa be mad at us? Emma asked. I knelt down to her level, thinking carefully about how to answer. Grandpa might be disappointed that we don't agree with his ideas. But part of being a grown-up is making your own choices about your family, even when other people think they know better. Emma considered this seriously. Like how I get to choose my own clothes, even when you think my pink and orange outfit looks funny. Exactly like that, I said, smiling despite the gravity of the situation. The next morning, Robert and I called my father and David together, requesting a family meeting to discuss the arrangements that had been announced at the birthday party. I'm not sure what there is to discuss, David said, his tone suggesting we were being unnecessarily difficult. Dad's plan makes perfect financial sense, and it uses everyone's abilities appropriately. That's exactly what we need to discuss, Robert replied. The assumptions about our abilities and our availability. We met that Sunday at my father's house, the same living room where so many family decisions had been made over the years. This time, however, Robert and I came prepared with our own agenda. My father sat in his usual chair with David and Claire positioned nearby like advisors. Robert and I sat across from them, a physical arrangement that seemed to emphasize the division. We appreciate your concern about coordinating family care as you age, Dad, I began, having practiced this conversation several times. But we have some concerns about the way this plan was announced and structured. My father's expression was patient but firm. Marie, family decisions require leadership. David has demonstrated that leadership capability. Family decisions require family input, I corrected. Robert and I weren't consulted about arrangements that fundamentally affect our lives and our children's lives. David leaned forward. Look, we're all trying to do what's best for Dad. This isn't about ego or control, it's about practical management. Then let's talk about the practical details, Robert said. You're proposing that you and Claire make financial decisions for our family while we provide the majority of physical caregiving. Is that accurate? Dad needs care coordination, Claire interjected. We have the experience managing complex schedules and resources. You have more time availability. We have jobs and children, I said firmly. Our time isn't more available, it's just less expensive. The room fell silent. I had said out loud what everyone knew but no one had acknowledged. This arrangement was based on the assumption that our time was worth less than theirs. My father's face hardened. Marie, I'm disappointed in this attitude. Family means sacrifice, and sacrifice means doing what's needed for the good of everyone. I agree completely, I replied, which is why everyone should sacrifice something, not just the people deemed less successful. What are you proposing? David asked, his voice tight with irritation. Robert and I exchanged a look. We had discussed this moment extensively. We're proposing equal partnership in all family decisions, Robert said. If we're going to coordinate Dad's care, then we all participate equally in planning and decision-making. And our family's finances remain our responsibility to manage. That's not practical, Claire said immediately. Different people have different capabilities. Different people have different perspectives, I corrected. That's what makes shared decision-making valuable. My father was quiet for a long moment, his expression calculating. Finally, he spoke. I think you're overcomplicating a simple arrangement, Marie. David and Claire are offering to help shoulder some significant responsibilities. They're offering to shoulder the decision-making while we shoulder the actual work, I said. That's not partnership, it's delegation. The conversation continued for another hour, with variations on the same themes. David and Claire presented logical arguments about efficiency and expertise. My father emphasized family duty and appropriate roles. Robert and I insisted on equal participation and mutual respect. In the end, no resolution was reached. My father announced that he would take some time to think about how to move forward, which we understood to mean he would figure out how to get us to comply. As we prepared to leave, he pulled Robert aside for a private word. I watched from across the room as my father spoke quietly but intensely to his son. Robert's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. When we got to the car, I asked what my father had said. Robert was quiet for several blocks before answering. He said I was letting you turn me against my family. He said he never thought I'd choose a wife over his guidance. The manipulation was so familiar, so predictable, and yet still powerful enough to make Robert question himself. What do you think? I asked gently. Robert pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, sitting quietly for a moment. I think, he said finally, that choosing my wife and children over someone else's control isn't a betrayal. It's what I'm supposed to do. That night, as we tucked Lucas and Emma into bed, Emma asked if the grown-up disagreement was resolved yet. We're working on it, sweetheart, I told her. Sometimes it takes time for everyone to understand each other. Will we still see Grandpa and Uncle David's family? Of course. We love them all very much. We just need to figure out how to love each other while still making our own choices. Emma nodded solemnly. Like how I love you even when you don't let me eat ice cream for breakfast. Exactly like that. After the children were asleep, Robert and I sat on our small back porch, looking up at the stars and processing the day's conversations. Are we doing the right thing? He asked. I thought about Emma's question at the birthday party, about the innocent clarity that had cut through years of accepted family dynamics. I think we're doing the honest thing, I said. For the first time, we're being honest about what this arrangement really is. And if they don't accept that? I took his hand, feeling the calluses from his weekend projects, the familiar strength that had built our life together. Then we'll build our own traditions. The children will learn that love doesn't require surrendering your dignity. As we sat in the quiet evening air, I realized that the conversation at my father's 70th birthday party had been the catalyst we needed. For years, we had accepted a family dynamic that diminished us while telling ourselves it was normal. But hearing our worth debated in public, watching our children witness the casual dismissal of their parents' capabilities, had finally made the cost too high to ignore. The champagne toast that was meant to solidify our subordinate role had instead become the moment we chose to claim our equal place in the family. Or, if necessary, to build our own definition of what family could be. 3 months after my father's birthday party, Robert and I had settled into a new rhythm of family relationships. It was different from what we had known before, but it was honest in a way that felt both challenging and liberating. Our conversation with my father and David had led to a series of family meetings where we gradually worked out a more equitable arrangement. It wasn't easy, and it required everyone to give up some of their preconceptions about family roles. David and Claire retained their expertise in financial planning, but as advisors rather than decision-makers. Robert and I maintained full control of our budget while contributing to coordinated care planning for my father. Most importantly, all major family decisions required input from both couples. The children adapted to the new dynamics more easily than the adults did. Lucas and Emma seemed to stand a little taller after seeing their parents advocate for equal treatment. They also developed closer relationships with Noah and Sophia once the competitive undertone was removed from family gatherings. My father struggled the most with the changed family structure. His identity had been built on being the benevolent patriarch whose wisdom guided everyone else's choices. Learning to consult rather than direct required him to question assumptions he had held for decades. "I still think you're overcomplicating simple matters," he said during one of our monthly family dinners. But he said it with less authority and more genuine puzzlement, as if he were trying to understand a perspective that didn't come naturally to him. Claire found her own adjustment challenging as well. She had genuinely believed that her success gave her special insight into what was best for everyone else. Learning to view our different choices as equally valid required her to examine some of her own assumptions about worth and contribution. "I never realized how condescending I sounded," she admitted during a conversation we had while the children played together. "I thought I was being helpful." Robert and I were in counseling, both individually, and as a couple, working through the patterns we had internalized during years of accepting diminished treatment. It was difficult work, recognizing how we had contributed to our own marginalization by avoiding conflict and seeking approval. I spent so much energy trying to prove we were worthy of respect. I told our counselor during one session, I never considered just insisting on it as a basic right. The most significant change was in how we approached decision-making as a family. Instead of Robert and me deferring to David and Claire's expertise, we all learned to value different perspectives and different priorities. "You know what I realized?" Robert said one evening as we cleaned up after a successful extended family dinner. "We were always trying to match their version of success instead of defining our own." I nodded, thinking about how much energy we had spent feeling inadequate about our suburban life. Our modest savings are practical choices. The children are learning to be proud of what we've built instead of ashamed that it's not something else. Our relationship with Sarah and her family had deepened as well. Having someone outside the family dynamics who could offer perspective had been crucial during the most difficult conversations. "I'm proud of you both," she said during a recent coffee visit. "It takes courage to change family patterns that have been in place for decades." The trust fund that had never existed in our story was replaced by something more valuable. The knowledge that we could shape our own family narrative rather than accepting someone else's version of our worth. Perhaps the most profound change was in how I viewed myself. For years, I had accepted the role of the responsible but unremarkable daughter-in-law, the steady but unspectacular mother, the competent but limited partner. The process of demanding equal treatment had required me to recognize my own capabilities and defend my own choices. The freedom to trust my own judgment, to make decisions without seeking approval or avoiding confrontation, was both energizing and sometimes overwhelming. There were still moments when the old patterns felt easier, when deferring to someone else's authority seemed simpler than navigating disagreement. Robert experienced similar struggles, particularly in his relationship with his father. Years of being the other son, the one whose achievements were acknowledged but not celebrated, had created patterns that took conscious effort to change. "I keep waiting for him to tell me I'm doing something wrong," he admitted after a family gathering where he had confidently expressed opinions that differed from David's. "It's hard to believe my perspective is as valuable as my brother's." We were learning that creating healthier family dynamics was an ongoing process rather than a single conversation or confrontation. It required constant attention to the small moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. What I want you to take from my story is this family hierarchy can disguise itself as natural order, but it's often just learned patterns that can be changed. The people who claim to know what's best for you may genuinely believe they're helping, but their good intentions don't make their control appropriate. Your capabilities are not defined by someone else's assessment of your success. Your worth is not determined by comparison to other family members. And it is never too late to insist on being treated as an equal partner in decisions that affect your life. The birthday party that was meant to establish a permanent family hierarchy became instead the catalyst for creating genuine partnership. Sometimes the most important choice we make is to value ourselves enough to demand that others value us too. Robert and I are still learning how to navigate family relationships based on mutual respect rather than inherited roles. There are still difficult conversations and moments when we fall back into old patterns. But we are moving forward with honesty and dignity, modeling for our children what it looks like to love family while maintaining your own integrity. The toast that was supposed to define our subordinate role became the moment we chose to claim our equal place in the family story. And that choice has made all the difference.